Thank you very much, Andrew, introducing me, and thanks the World Association for Disaster and Emergency Medicine asking me to give the webinar for audience. And welcome, and thank you for joining the webinar today. My name is Chiaki Toida. I'm Vice Chair of the Department of Disaster Medical Management at the University of Tokyo. I continue to work and research while thinking about what I can do for children with critically ill or critically injured as a pediatric emergency physician. I will present on the newly developed secondary triage method for children. Let's look at today's overview. Here is an outline of my presentation. First, I'll give a brief overview of disaster in Japan, and second is a discussion on disaster management for children. Then third, I'll talk about the triage, followed by the newly developed secondary triage method called the PPATS. Finally, I'll conclude with future prospects for the PPATS. To give you an overview of disaster in Japan, as you can see in this slide, in Japan, several types of disaster occur in recent 20 years, such as tsunami, earthquake, terrorism attack, and radiation accident, and so on. Japan is located in the Southern Pacific Mobile Belt, where seismic and volcano activities occurred constantly. Therefore, Japan is considered a natural disaster-prone country. Specifically, nearly 20% of the world earthquakes of magnitude 6 or above occurred in or around Japan. Moreover, because of geographical, topographical, and meteorological conditions, Japan is subject to frequent natural disasters, such as earthquakes and tsunami, torrential rain, heavy snowfalls, and typhoon. These disasters have caused a great loss of lives every year. I think it is impressed on your memories after the magnitude 9 Great East Japan earthquake in 2011. Over 15,000 people died. At that time, unfortunately, 727 children also died. Such number of deaths of children represents 6% of total deaths, and that percentage share is not insignificant. Therefore, disaster management plan to address the needs of children is important in a disaster, especially given that 10 to 30% of the casualties in major incidents are children. Children have higher mortality in disasters. Moreover, they have various considerations and needs. In particular, children have age-related differences. First is the physiological variables. Normal range of pediatric vital signs vary age by age. Second is anatomical variables. As shown in this graph, children have various body size ranging from infant to small adult. Once major incident occurs, there is an imbalance between casualties and resources. Therefore, a triage is an essential part of the medical management and the support at the disaster setting. Wherever a triage is implemented, the aim are to not only deliver the right patient to the right place at the right time, so that they receive the optimum treatment, but also do the most for the most, such that valuable medical resources should not be delivered to treating irrecoverable condition. In terms of the timing of triage, casualties must be triaged repeatedly whenever they enter different stage of their conditions and care. The endpoint of triage process is the allocation of the priority. In general, there are 4 categories, namely immediate, urgent, late, and dead. There are 2 types of triage method at the disaster setting. One type of triage method is primary triage. The aim of the primary triage is to sieve through cause of the large number of injured casualties to establish some sort of a medical order. Therefore, a large number of triage decisions must be made quickly. The other type of triage method is secondary triage. It has several practical limitations. It can only be performed relatively slowly in the setting, with a relatively sufficient number of staff and medical resources. It has a great role in defining the result of primary triage. In triage, the several types of triage methods are used by each country. This is a representative triage method. In primary triage, the start simple triage rapid treatment method is most frequently used in Japan. This is an example of the start triage algorithm used in Japan. Walking victims are coded as delayed. Non-breathing victims, despite airway positioning, are coded as dead. Victims with a respiratory rate under 9 or over 30 per minute, with an absent radial pulse, or who count for simple commands are coded as immediate. Other victims are coded as urgent. In secondary triage, the PAT method, Physiological and Anatomical Triage, or TRTS method, Triage Revised Trauma Score, are most frequently used in Japan. This is an example of the PAT and TRTS triage algorithm used in Japan. The PAT is assessed based on 4 factors, namely physiological variables, anatomical variables, mechanism of injury, and the necessity of special care. Patients with at least 1 physiological or anatomical variables are coded as immediate. The TRTS is scored based on physiological variables, with 12 points as its maximum score. Patients with a score between 1 point and 10 points are coded as immediate. Now, I would draw your attention to the limitation of the conventional primary triage method for children that were revealed in our previous study. In this study, we performed a triage drill within hospital pediatric patients and evaluate the accuracy of the START method for pediatric patients. The result shows that Most pediatric patients were coded as an immediate priority using STAT methods. Moreover, the over-triage rate was higher among younger children. That is, 92% of patients under 2 years old were over-triaged. This table demonstrated the detail of candidate algorithm of STAT by age group. Most of patients under 2 years old fit the algorithm: can't walk, respiratory rate over 30 per minute, and can't follow the commands. However, based on the pediatric physiological perspective, even if people under 2 years old fit these three algorithms, all patients are not necessarily abnormal. Rather than most patients are normal. Such viewpoint explains the extremely high over-triage rate among younger children when using STAT methods. Given these limitations, the next question would be the type of triage method that is optimum for children. Now, I'd like to show you the result of the previous study on the accuracy of each triage method. As you can see in this table, there are no striking differences in terms of the accuracy of triage method for children. Moreover, there is no triage method that has been validated for children. These findings promoted us to develop a new triage method for children to improve the current poor condition of addressing the needs of children in a disaster setting. We selected the secondary triage as a starting point for developing a new triage method because it can refine the results of primary triage. The objectives of this study were: first, to develop a new advanced secondary triage method for children in a disaster setting. Second, to compare the accuracy of triage method for identifying patients who require immediate treatment. And third, to evaluate the correlation between the score calculated by the new developed secondary triage method and the severity and outcome of the patients. This study was a single-center retrospective chart review study. We studied 137 patients who are admitted to the emergency center from 2014 to 2016. Inclusion criteria were patients under 16 years old who stayed for over 3 hours at the emergency department, who were transported directly from the scene and without missing data. The exclusion criterion was patients who experienced out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. Then, first, we developed the PPATS. Second, its accuracy was compared with that of PAT and TRTS for predicting the triage priority as immediate. Patients admitted to the intensive care unit were defined as a truly immediate. The accuracy of each method was assessed by determining the area under the curve. Third, we evaluate the correlation between the PPATS score and the severity of outcome of patients, the predicted mortality rate, ventilation time, ICU length of stay, and hospital length of stay. Here, I'm showing you PPATS criteria and scoring system. The PPATS was calculated based on physiological variables and anatomical abnormalities and the needs for life-saving intervention. Based on previous reports, percentile and normal range of physiological variables for each age were calculated. The score was performed as follows: 1 equal normal, 0 equal normal, 1 equal mild, 2 equal moderate, 3 equal severe, 4 equal serious. The total score was the sum of 6 factors and ranged from 0, the minimum score, to 22, the maximum score. Next, I'd like to present the results. Here, you can see patient characteristics. Of the 137 patients, 24 were admitted to ICU. ICU patients were defined as truly immediate. These patients had a median age of 135 months. The median ventilation time was 3 days. The median ICU and hospital length of stay was 5 and 15 days, respectively. The mean PPATS score of ICU patients was significantly higher than that of non-ICU patients. Now, I'd like to present the main result of our study. The accuracy values of PPATS, PAT, and TRTS method are shown here. According to AUC analysis, the optimum cutoff values of PPATS for predicting the triage priority as immediate was 6 points. The PPATS sensitivity and specificity was 95% and 86% respectively. And the AUC was larger for the PPATS than the PATS of TRTS. I'd like to draw your attention to the remarkable results of our study. Here, you can see the correlation between the PPATS score and the severity and the outcome of patients. In each panel, the horizontal axis represents the PPATS score. From the upper left to the lower right, the vertical axis represents a predicted mortality rate, ventilation time, ICU length of stay, and hospital length of stay. The important point here is that regression analysis shows significant correlation between the PPATS score and the severity and the outcome of patients. That is, the results show that we can determine the priority ranking for treatment or transportation based on the PPATS score. In summary, we found in this study that the accuracy of PPATS, a newly developed secondary triage method for children, was superior to the conventional triage method, such as the PATS and TRTS. The PATS is useful for not only classifying high-priority patients, but also determine the priority ranking based on the PPATS score. Let me highlight the advantage of the PPATS. First, PPATS was accurate compared with the conventional triage method. Both over and under triaging at the disaster setting are said to result in an increasing in the number of preventable disaster deaths. However, the PPATS was made while combining the advantage of each conventional triage method. From the PTT method, we adopted its strengths in assessing based on the age-related variation of children. From the PATS method, we adopted its strengths in assessing based on the several variables. From the TRTS methods, We adopted its strengths in assessing based on scoring system. By combining these strengths of the conventional triage method into one, the PPATS turns out to have high accuracy as a triage method. Next, the PPATS has a scoring system that is available for assessing the severity of patients. In this slide, the left figure shows a feature of conventional method, and the right figure shows the feature of PPATS method. As shown in these figures, the PPATS score can be an objective criteria because PPATS has calculated the score based on the severity of patients. Thus, PPATS is useful for not only classifying high-priority patients, but also determining the priority ranking for treatment and transportation. Finally, the PPATS uses physiological and anatomical measures. Disaster setting is the same as those commonly measures when patients are monitored in hospital at a no-disaster setting. The PPATS may be useful in that it serves both a triage tool and as a clinically used tool that is like a disaster medical record for monitoring a patient condition. This study has several limitations. First, this study was a single-center retrospective study. A new method is generally validated through 3 steps: derivation, retrospective validation, and prospective validation. However, this study only covered the first 2 steps. Second, PPATS can classify only the immediate priority. Thereby, I'm going to conduct additional large-scale prospective study to confirm the accuracy of PPATS and to classify the main priority urgent and delayed. I'm approaching the end of my presentation. Before I wrap up, let me tell you about the prospects for the PPATS. A large earthquake is predicted to occur in Japan. When a disaster with a widespread damage occurs, people in the affected area must evacuate to anywhere outside the damaged area. When we determine the priority of patients adopted for the wide area transportation, a unified objective criteria system in Japan is necessary. The PPAT may be utilized as the objective criteria for wide area transportation. I also developed the application of the PPATS for smartphone and tablet. This application equips with a function to automatically calculate the PPATS score by entering the 6 factors in PPATS algorithm. As I explained, the algorithm eliminates the complication in assessing physiological variables based on pediatric age-related factors. Also, we can use the application as a medical record system by monitoring and reporting a patient's conditions repeatedly. This is an example for the Japanese version of PPATS application software. As shown in this video movie, when I enter 6 factors following the direction, we can see consequent triage priority and PPATS score in the screen. automatically. In conclusion, a pediatric physiological-based medical management plan for children is an important component in a disaster preparedness for major incidents. The newly secondary disaster triage is accurate and useful for pediatric triage, treatment, and transport. We would like to popularize the PPATS by improving the operation system. Thank you for attention. I hope you enjoy my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Toida. I know it's very challenging to do a presentation in a language that is not your first language, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. So we're at a point in the webinar where we can have questions from the remote audience. So if you would like to ask a question directly, you can raise your hand. There's a little hand icon, and you can click on that, and I can unmute your microphone, and you can ask a question directly, or you can send me a question, and I will read it. I do have one that came in a few minutes ago during the presentation, so I'll go ahead and read that. It's from Heidi Baker, and she had said, how long does the triage take, I presume by using this system?
When I can't use application of PPATS, it takes 5 minutes or within 10 minutes. But when I use the application of PPATS, I can finish within 5 minutes.
So if you use the app that you demonstrated in the presentation, that would be 5 minutes, and if you were just doing it without the app, you're saying about 10 minutes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second part of her question is, what training would you envision is required for this?
I think training is needed because the pediatric vital sign is it is difficult to evaluate the pediatric vital sign because it is differentiation depends on age. So, but if I use the application of PPATS, we can evaluate the pediatric vital sign without training. Because of it, the application is very effective for everyone who can not train for children.
So we have another question here that's asking if the app that you demonstrated, is that available in English?
Yeah, not yet, but I hope I will develop the English version.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This triage system, the PPATS, is the kind of maximum age that you would use this 16 years old? I know you mentioned that in your study that was the cutoff age. Is that what you would envision in the future if this was widely adopted, that you would use it up to children and teenagers up to age 16?
Yes, yes, age 16, under 16 years old.
Okay, and I had a question, not so much about the triage system, but in one of the earlier slides in the presentation, you had mentioned that 10 to 30% of victims of disasters, and
Yes.
I don't recall if it was fatalities or just victims, are children. Is that number from Japan, or is that a more global number?
It's global number,
Okay.
but this number include natural disaster.
Okay, we just had another question come in from Dr. Carl Schultz, and I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. It says, it seems PPATS does not include estimated probability of survival.
Yeah.
So it seems you can have a critical patient that will use many resources yet may not survive. Do you plan to include estimated probability of survival in the future to help ration resources?
Yes. In the future, I hope I can evaluate the probability of mortality. I show the result. PPATS has a correlation between PPATS score and the outcome of patient. So PPATS, in the future, I will show the correlation between the predicted mortality and the PPATS score.
All right, well, thanks for going ahead and answering that. I don't see any more questions, and it appears that we have a shy audience, that no one wants to unmute their microphone and ask a question directly. So if we have no further questions, did you have any concluding words you wanted to say before we go ahead and end the webinar?
Thank you. That's all.
Okay, well, that's perfect. Again, thank you for doing the presentation. Just so the audience knows, it was 7 a.m. in Japan when Dr. Toida started the presentation, so it was quite early. And so we appreciate you getting up to do a presentation at such an early time of the day. As I mentioned at the beginning, when I'll be sending out, when I finish the recording and post it online, I'll send out a notification to the registration list as well as a link to the slides. And we're working on the calendar for the remaining webinars of 2018, and we have some really good ones lined up tentatively. So once we confirm dates and times, we'll let you know as well. So thank you everyone for supporting the webinar series. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send them to me by email. Everyone have a great evening, morning, afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're in. Thanks much.
Yeah, thank you.